Controlling the South China Sea is a tough task for China due to various reasons. History shows us how conflicts over ocean territories have been challenging. Take the Falklands War in 1982, for example, where nations fought over faraway islands and seas they wanted to claim. Similarly, in the mid-1800s, the Crimean War was about powerful countries vying for control of important water routes. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 also demonstrated how disagreements over islands like Cuba can create global tensions.
American men of war rapidly deployed, and to the red ships bound for Cuba went orders to change course. Khrushchev knew President Kennedy was not bluffing.
Any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Plus, the late 19th century scramble for Africa and the 1956 Suez Crisis revealed how disputes over coastal regions and sea passages can turn into major international struggles. These historical events shed light on why China faces difficulties in controlling the South China Sea today. Let us get into the detail of an important question of our day. Why controlling South China Sea will be challenging for China? When considering China's approach to control in the South China Sea, it's important to distinguish between actual control, reflecting the tangible authority China currently wields in certain areas, and aspired control, which encompasses China's broader ambitions and strategic goals for the region. While China may aspire to assert comprehensive control over the entire South China Sea, the practical realities and challenges of implementing such ambitions may not fully align with its aspirations. Balancing assertiveness with pragmatism becomes crucial in understanding these complexities. Moreover, China faces a spectrum of choices in terms of the degrees of dominance it seeks to exert in the South China Sea. This spectrum ranges from benign influence, where China uses its economic and diplomatic leverage to shape outcomes, to more assertive and potentially oppressive forms of control, which could involve coercive tactics or territorial expansion. Each degree of dominance represents a strategic choice for China, requiring careful consideration of diplomatic, economic, and military implications. Controlling the South China Sea presents a formidable challenge for China due to a multitude of interconnected factors. Firstly, China's expansive territorial claims in the region, driven by the attraction of abundant untapped oil and natural gas reserves, have heightened long-standing tensions with neighboring claimants, including Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Disputes over islands in resource-rich zones like the Spratly Islands, dating back to the 1970s, remain unresolved despite diplomatic efforts, fueling regional arms buildups and undermining international maritime laws.
This is Chinese Navy aircraft carrier 16. Please keep a safe distance from us.
China's legal stance, citing international law to restrict foreign military activities within its exclusive economic zone, EEZ, clashes with the United States' advocacy for freedom of navigation under UNCLOS, which opposes prior notification to claimants. The 2016 ruling by The Hague's Permanent Court of Arbitration in favor of the Philippines against China under UNCLOS stands as a direct challenge to China's claims and island-building activities in the South China Sea. Yet China refuses to acknowledge this ruling, despite being a signatory to the convention.
I should say the so-called arbitral tribunal was based on the illegal action and claim of the Philippines from the very onset, so its very existence is not legitimate.
Satellite imagery reveals China's excessive efforts to expand land features in the South China Sea, including the construction of new islands and fortification of existing ones with ports, military installations, and airstrips, notably in the Paracel and Spratly Islands. China's militarization efforts on Woody Island and its establishment of numerous outposts pinpoints its strategic ambitions in the region. The United States, with vested interest in ensuring navigation freedom and safeguarding sea lines of communication, SLOCs, advocates for a binding code of conduct and other confidence-building measures in response to China's claims, which jeopardize crucial trade routes and naval movements. U.S. defense ties with Manila further elevate the stakes, particularly concerning disputed resources like natural gas deposits and fishing grounds. China's assertiveness also faces resistance from Japan, which has increased maritime security for regional allies like the Philippines and Vietnam. The crux of the South China Sea disputes revolves around the delimitation of islands, reefs, and adjacent waters among claimants, with China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei in contention. China's expansive jurisdictional claims, including Taiwan's, over the entire sea without clear territorial control conflict with Vietnam's and the Philippines' claims, leading to extensive overlaps and confusions. The significance of the South China Sea varies among stakeholders. The U.S. emphasizes economic trade routes, military navigation principles, and peaceful dispute resolution. Vietnam and the Philippines prioritize nationalism, fishing rights, and oil exploration.
To enhancing our regional economic integration agenda. Our goal is to create an environment that encourages collaboration, innovation, mutual growth. Vietnam's economic dynamism and the Philippines' strategic location makes this collaboration not only beneficial, but essential for the progress of both our countries.
And China's motivations stem from historical narratives and long-standing claims.
China urges the Philippines to cease its violations and provocations, to stop its unwarranted attacks, and to refrain from acts that undermine peace in the South China Sea.
The South China Sea's global importance as a critical shipping route rich in seafood and oil reserves highlights the economic stakes at play. China's utilization of gray zone tactics, such as deploying fishing and patrol vessels and constructing artificial islands, challenges regional security and disrupts international maritime traffic. For the United States, maintaining a strategic presence in the South China Sea is vital to upholding freedom of navigation and countering excessive maritime claims through diplomatic and operational measures. The South China Sea serves as a critical maritime conduit, facilitating approximately 1/3 of global shipping traffic and hosting substantial trade valued at trillions of dollars annually. For major economies like China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, the sea's strategic importance is underpinned by its role as a vital link between the Pacific and Indian Oceans, primarily through the Strait of Malacca. China, as the world's second-largest economy, heavily relies on maritime trade, with over 60% of its trade value conducted via sea routes traversing the South China Sea. Concerns regarding the vulnerability of this crucial trade route have led to widespread attention, particularly the assertion that $5.3 trillion worth of goods transit through the South China Sea each year, with a substantial portion accounting for trade with the United States. The South China Sea's significance extends beyond mere trade volume. The sea's strategic choke points, notably the Strait of Malacca, raise concerns about potential disruptions that could reverberate globally. A short-term closure of this critical passageway could result in additional shipping costs reaching millions of dollars per week, while a long-term closure would have far-reaching consequences. For instance, a prolonged disruption could lead to supply chain disruptions similar to the impact of the 2011 Thailand floods, which significantly affected global manufacturing and supply chains, particularly in the electronics sector. Energy disruptions would be especially impactful, considering that nearly 80% of China's oil imports transit through the South China Sea via the Strait of Malacca. While China's growing regional influence raises concerns about potential disruptions, it remains in China's economic interest to preserve the free flow of trade through the region. Nevertheless, the risk of escalated tensions or conflicts affecting these vital sea lanes highlights the need for continued efforts to uphold freedom of navigation and ensure the uninterrupted flow of maritime commerce in this pivotal geopolitical arena. Over the last decade and a half, the South China Sea has become a focal point of strategic rivalry between the United States and China. China's extensive activities, including island building and military base construction in the Spratly Islands, have raised concerns among U.S. policymakers that China is gaining de facto control over this critical region, which holds strategic, political, and economic significance for the U.S. and its allies. China's actions in the East China Sea, particularly at the Senkaku Islands administered by Japan, are also viewed with apprehension by U.S. observers. If China were to dominate its near seas region comprising the South China Sea, East China Sea, and Yellow Sea, it could have profound implications for U.S. strategic, political, and economic interests across the Indo-Pacific region and globally. The broader U.S. objectives in strategic competition with China in the South China Sea and the East China Sea encompass several key goals. These include fulfilling U.S. security commitments to treaty allies like Japan and the Philippines, strengthening the U.S.-led security framework in the Western Pacific, preserving a regional balance of power favorable to the U.S. and its partners, upholding principles of peaceful dispute resolution and opposing coercive tactics in international affairs, safeguarding freedom of navigation, preventing Chinese regional hegemony, and integrating these objectives into a broader U.S. strategy for engaging with and managing relations with China. In addition to these overarching goals, specific U.S. aims in the South China Sea and East China Sea involve dissuading China from expanding military infrastructure in the South China Sea, discouraging actions that could alter the status quo at sites like Scarborough Shoal, promoting adherence to international norms such as freedom of the seas, and urging China to respect the 2016 tribunal ruling in the South China Sea arbitration case with the Philippines. The U.S. strategy in the Indo-Pacific region has historically emphasized Northeast Asia, focusing on defense commitments to Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. This strategy prioritizes the ability to respond decisively to potential Chinese aggression in this area, relying on a combination of conventional forces and nuclear deterrence. As a result, U.S. military presence and readiness have been concentrated in Northeast Asia. However, this focus has sometimes led to challenges in deploying resources effectively across the broader Indo-Pacific region, impacting strategic credibility and flexibility. The U.S. approach has predominantly relied on a hub-and-spoke alliance structure, which has posed limitations in organizing collective security measures against China's actions. For instance, the U.S. response to Chinese provocations around the Senkaku Islands relied heavily on Japan's capabilities, and the U.S. did not intervene when China seized Scarborough Shoal from the Philippines in 2012. This selective engagement raised doubts among regional partners about U.S. commitment and credibility. China has leveraged a combination of incentives and coercion to expand its influence in the region, exploiting gaps in U.S. strategy and commitments. Vietnam, located in the northwestern South China Sea region, shares overlapping claims with China over the Paracel and Spratly Islands. Vietnam maintains a balanced approach, boosting its defense capabilities while managing relations with both the U.S. and China. It has sought security partnerships with the U.S., diversifying its arms procurement and maritime assets to protect its interest in the Spratly Islands. The Philippines, situated in the northeast South China Sea region, has experienced shifts in its foreign policy, particularly under President Duterte, who sought closer ties with China. This approach has strained relations with the U.S. despite ongoing military cooperation against Chinese encroachments. Now, in the presidency of President Ferdinand Marcos, the country is again seeking closer ties with the United States again to counter China's expansive claims. The Philippine military faces challenges due to budget constraints and an internal focus on counterinsurgency. Malaysia, located in the central and southern South China Sea region, has oscillated between accommodation with China and alignment with the U.S. Recent political changes have led to a more assertive stance, emphasizing adherence to international law in the South China Sea region. Malaysia's military capabilities are limited, with a focus on internal security challenges and maritime surveillance. As the largest Southeast Asian nation, Indonesia plays a pivotal role in ASEAN diplomacy and maritime security. Indonesia's maritime fulcrum strategy aims to defend its interest in the Natuna Sea against Chinese incursions. However, Indonesia remains cautious about formal alliances and is focused on internal security priorities. The Southeast Asian nations, bolstered by support from the United States, are actively pushing back against China's expanding influence in the region, marking a concerted effort to counterbalance Beijing's ambitions. This collective action is multifaceted and includes diplomatic, economic, and security dimensions. Firstly, the U.S.-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership depicts America's commitment to Southeast Asia, demonstrated through high-level summits like the U.S.-ASEAN Summit and the East Asia Summit, attended by Vice President Kamala Harris.
We stand with our allies and partners in defending the maritime rules-based order, which includes freedom of navigation and international law.
Additionally, the Biden-Harris administration's proposed 2024 budget allocates a substantial $1.2 billion for economic development and security assistance to Southeast Asian nations, with an extra $90 million specifically aimed at strengthening engagement with ASEAN institutions. However, challenges persist, and Southeast Asian countries require robust national leadership and strengthened military capabilities, including navies, coast guards, air forces, and marines, to deter aggression and prevent territorial expansion in the South China Sea. Some nations, such as Vietnam and Singapore, are also diversifying their strategic partnerships with countries like India, Japan, and Europe to offset China's naval prowess and assertive behavior.
What exactly is CUES?
CUES means Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea. Its goal is to prevent collisions and misunderstandings by very simple and clear signals.
The legal rulings concerning the South China Sea and China's contentious new 10-line claim are significant in shaping regional dynamics and maritime disputes. The 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, PCA, in The Hague favored the Philippines in its arbitration case against China over the South China Sea. This landmark ruling deemed major components of China's claim, notably the dash line and recent land reclamation activities, as unlawful. The tribunal's decision had far-reaching implications for China's territorial assertions and activities in the region. However, China promptly rejected the ruling, asserting that it was null and void, and emphasized that its territorial sovereignty and marine rights would not be affected. Chinese state media criticized the verdict, dismissing it as ill-founded and accused the tribunal of disregarding international laws and norms. In essence, the South China Sea stands as a microcosm of complex geopolitical rivalries, strategic maneuvering, and environmental concerns. China's quest for control in this pivotal maritime domain faces formidable challenges, from territorial disputes and legal complexities to resistance from regional stakeholders and international actors like the United States. As tensions persist and interests clash, effective management of this multifaceted issue demands a balance of diplomacy, compliance of international law, and collaborative efforts to ensure the stability, security, and sustainability of one of the world's most vital maritime passages.